Okay, so now we know our target database is called OWASP10. Let's try and discover the tables that exist in that database. So this is our select statement. It's a union select one, and we have these things. So I'm gonna leave this or change these to null because I only want to select one thing now, and I'm gonna set this to null as well. And in number 2, we're going to select table name from. Now we're gonna select this from a database called information schema. Now I said this in the first video of SQL that information schema is a default database created by MySQL, and it contains information about all other databases. So what we're doing now, we're selecting the table name from information schema dot, and after the dot you put the table. So basically we're selecting a table called tables from a database called information schema, and the column that we're selecting is called table name. So we're selecting table name from the database that's called information schema from the table tables. Let's execute this and see if we can get all the tables that exist in a OWASP10 database. So we can see we got 237 records, and you can see all the tables that we have. So these are all the tables that we have access to. So again, I said we are logged in as root, therefore we can actually see tables from other web applications such as the TikiWiki, but in real life scenarios, you'll only see tables related to your current database, which is Matilda. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a where clause, and I'm gonna say where the table schema is equal to OWASP10. So OWASP10 was what we got when we selected the database. So we got OWASP10, which is our current database that Matilda is working on. So we're using the same statement. We're selecting the table name from information schema tables, where the table schema is OWASP10. So I'm going to copy that and execute it here. And as you can see now, we have so much less tables, and we only have the ones that we're interested in. So we have the accounts, the blogs, capture data, credit cards, hit log, and the pentest tools. Now, if you remember in the first or the second video in the SQL injection videos, I showed you what the content of the OWASP table was, and it was these tables of the OWASP database. Now let's see if we can select and get and have a look on all the accounts that exist within this table. So let's see if we can query the database and read the information stored in the accounts table. To do that, we're going to first need to know the column names of the columns that exist within this table. Because if you look at the way we're using our statement, we're doing union select column name from a table. So we still don't know what columns exist in accounts. Now we can try and guess that there is a username and a password, but sometimes they could be different names. So I'm going to show you how you can select the columns for a certain table. The command is going to be very similar to the tables command. And the only difference is instead of table name, we're going to say column name. And instead of selecting it from the information schema.tables, we're going to select it from information schema.columns. And we're going to say where the table name is equal to accounts, because we're interested into the accounts table. If you wanted to get columns for another table, then you just substitute this with the table, or with the column that with the table that you want. So our command is going to be union select one column name from the information schema.columns, where the table name is the table that we're interested in, which is the accounts. And this should show us all the columns that exist within the accounts table. So let's run this command. And perfect. Same columns that we've seen before, and it's CID, username, password, my signature, and is admin. Now let's take this one step further and select the usernames and passwords from the account table. So again, the command is going to be very similar to what we're running at the moment. We're going to be selecting, and we're going to select username, and I'm going to select the password for number 2, and for number 3 we're going to select the is admin. Now remember, I can't select anything instead of number 1 and number 5 because they're never displayed for me on screen. The only thing that I see was number 2, 3, and 4, which were displayed here, 2, 3, and 4. So therefore, I'm only substituting values for 2, 3, and 4. And we're gonna select that from accounts. And we're not gonna need the where, so I'm gonna delete the where. So very simple statement. We're selecting username, password, is admin from the accounts. And this should return all the usernames and passwords that exist within the current table, that exist in the accounts table. And I have an extra quote here that I'm going to delete. And as you can see, we got all the usernames and passwords. We have the admin, and their password is admin pass. We have other users, and we have their passwords, and it's also telling us whether they are admins or not. This is very useful because in most websites, when you log in as admin, you have so much more privileges than a normal person, and then you'd be able to upload PHP shells or backdoors, viruses, whatever you want to do really, and then further exploit the system. So at the moment, I can actually log in with a username admin and a password admin pass, and it's gonna accept that because it's correct. So no matter how complicated the password was, we're just gonna be able to read it because we're reading it straight from the database. In this lecture, I'd like to show you how we can use SQL injections to read any file in the server. So even if the file exists outside the www root, we'll be able to read it exactly like a file disclosure vulnerability. And we'll also see how we can use it to write files and upload them to the system, just like a file upload vulnerability. So the first thing we're going to have a look at is the read in the file. And I'm gonna set everything to null here. So I have my statement here, and I'm gonna set select 1. I'm gonna leave number 2 because I'm gonna do stuff in that. And we're gonna do another 3 nulls here. So null, null, null. So we have select null, something null, null, null. So 5 because we have 5 records when we did the order by. And instead of selecting something, remember in the third video we did select database, for example, and it showed us the current database. What I want to do now is I want to do another function, and that function is called load file. And in here, I'm going to set the file that I want to load, and I'm going to use the same file that we had a look on in the file inclusion vulnerability, and it was etc password. So we're trying to read that file, and our statement is union select that file And that's it. So I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna inject it here, and I'm gonna add my percentage 23, which is my comment. And as you can see, we managed to read all the information, all the content of etc password, even though it's not in the web root, so it's stored in etc password. So we can read anything in the server from other websites, from other files, anywhere in the server we can read it by specifying the full path of that file. The next thing I'd like to show you is writing to the server. So we're actually going to write stuff to the server, and this is very useful because you'd be able to write any code you want. So for example, you can write the code for a PHP script, you can write a code for a shell, a virus, or a PHP code to get a reverse connection to you. So it'll basically just act like a file upload vulnerability. And to do that, I'm going to write the code that I want to do here, and I'm going to call that, for example, just example. And we're going to use a function called outFile. So we're going to do into outFile, and then we're going to specify where we want to store that file. Now, in best case scenarios, you'd be able to write to your web root, and that will mean that you can access the file through the browser and execute it. So you can upload a Weebly file and then connect to it and do stuff like that. So let's try to do that first. So we're gonna do it in var www, and that's our web root, so we'll be able to access things through it. Or you can put it even var www and then put Matilda after it to store it in there. So the command is very simple. Again, union select. Make sure you set everything to null so that nothing gets written to the file except what you put in here. And I put example, and it's going to be stored into a file in var www Matilda, and we'll call that example.txt. Let's try to run this and see if it works. Now this didn't work, and if you come down here, you'll see that SQL or MySQL is not allowed to create or write to this directory. So the problem is the permissions that we have don't allow us to write to this particular location. So just to test this exploit, I'm going to change this location to TMP, which is the temp. And you'll see that you can actually write to temp. So in real life scenarios, it depends. You can try it and see if you're able to write stuff or not. In this, we're trying to write to temp now, and if we read in temp, if we clear that, and then ls and temp, you'll see that we have something called example, and if we try to read that, you'll see that it contains the content of what we did before, which was the normal selection that you'd see. So what you see for putting the stuff for admin, and then it showed us what's in there, which is example, which is what we wanted to write to the file. Now you can obviously get rid of the admin and the admin pass stuff by just putting a wrong username, and nothing is going to be displayed here. So the only thing that you'll see is the output, which is example. But again, this is only useful if you're able to write to your web server, so you can access it and then use your shell or use your payload and further exploit the system.